Chapter 9. Hanging from the Branches Above. As the afternoon sun blazed from above, the Princess of Hyrule trotted along her white horse, following the winding paths of the Tabantha region. She carefully consulted the map in her hands before looking up at the mountains surrounding her.
It has to be here somewhere. I was told that one had been located on the top of a mountain at the Tabantha frontier. If I remember correctly, there should be some ancient columns nearby. Hey!
Slowing from a trot to a walk, the white stallion veered off the road and began roaming the fields with its head lowered as it attempted to sniff out the healthiest grass to graze on. At this, the princess furrowed her brow.
Come on, you. Now isn't the time. There's a shrine near here which might hold valuable information. Ah!
She tugged lightly at the reins, but the horse simply shook its mane in retort and trotted further into the fields, still searching for a satisfactory patch of grass.
No. You won't find grass or wheat as high quality as that of the castle. Come on now, back to the road.
She tugged the reins harder. The horse whinnied in annoyance before rearing up on its hind legs, almost throwing its rider off the saddle entirely. Desperately, the princess held on to the reins as tightly as possible until her horse planted its front hooves. Though nervous, she tugged again, much lighter than she had before. Thankfully, the horse obeyed, once again trotting toward the road.
See? That wasn't so hard.
Ignoring her own delusion of confidence in her riding skills, she continued to guide her horse down the roads until, eventually, she could see the columns in the distance, on top of one of the low mountain's peaks. At this, she smiled.
There, that must be it. Whoa!
Yet again, the steed detoured off the road. This time, however, the horse located the type of grass it was after and came to a complete stop, peacefully grazing away. At this, the princess huffed in anger.
Fine then. Have your moment. It's not as though you've obeyed me before, nor have any other of your kind.
Sliding from the saddle, the princess gave the horse a haughty glance before continuing her journey on foot. She followed the switchbacks of the path as it took her higher up the mountain, eventually turning from dirt to mossy brick. The columns she had seen from a distance came properly into view. They were very old, with chunks of their sides worn away by time and the elements. Some were lying on the ground, while those still standing were either cracked or completely broken, some missing their upper halves. The princess marveled at the pillars as she followed the path upward, stepping up the occasional eroded staircase. It was a beautiful place, one without brutish animals who wouldn't listen or people with ever-watchful eyes. It was just her, and all the fascinating history that surrounded her. Yet, despite how amazing the ancient architecture was, what waited at the end brought her true excitement.
There it is.
Sitting at the top of the mountain was a large, strange stone relic, much darker than the alabaster-hued pillars surrounding it. Orange light swirled along its base. While it looked almost natural to the earth, it was clear this was a man-made structure, as it had a platform and a door, which was completely sealed.
I found it. A shrine, one left behind by the ancient Sheikah monks. I knew there was one up here.
With excitement flowing through her, she stepped toward the relic and climbed onto the platform, folding the map she was holding before stowing it away in the pouch on her waist. Her hands now free, she pulled out the much smaller, rectangular relic hanging from her hip. With a tap of a finger on its shiny side, its front glowed, and the princess held the object ready, eagerly expecting something to happen. But nothing did.
No immediate response to the Sheikah slate.
She looked around before noticing a pedestal near the sealed door.
If I remember correctly, that's a guidance stone, or at least part of one. Let's see here.
Curious, the princess stepped toward the large, cylindrical stone and crouched down, inspecting its base and body. Gently sliding her fingers across the dark stone's surface, she thoughtfully hummed.
It certainly doesn't seem active. Is it in slumber, just as the slate was?
With a thoughtful hum, she pushed herself back to her feet, staring at the slanted top of the guidance stone before pressing the Sheikah slate against it. Though the slate was glowing, the guidance stone didn't respond.
Nothing. Just as I thought. From what I've read, these structures were supposedly designed to be exclusively accessed by the Sword's Chosen One. Of course.
Dejectedly, she looked down at the slate in her hands, creasing her brow in thought, then looked back up at the structure again. Taking a step back to get a better view of the shrine as a whole, she took a breath.
Still, designs can always be worked around. At least I hope. How do I get inside? There must be a way to activate it somehow. Huh?
A distant neighing disrupted her thought process. Perking her pointed ears up, the princess turned, wondering if her horse had finally decided to catch up with its rider, and while she did see her white stallion, it was following another horse, a dark brown mare carrying someone the princess knew by his sandy hair, blue tunic, and glistening purple sword. His presence, however, didn't bring a smile to her face. In fact, her brow furrowed even more while her fingers tightly gripped the slate in her hands. Frustrated, she watched as the young warrior brought his mare and her stallion to a stop with ease before sliding off the saddle himself. With that expressionless face of his, he darted toward the shrine and the princess. But before he could come to a complete stop, she began speaking.
I thought I made it clear that I am not in need of an escort.
She stepped off the shrine's platform and stomped toward him, placing the slate back onto the belt on her hip. Coming to a stop in front of him, though purposely leaving a few paces between them, she raised her chin and placed her hands on her hips.
It seems I'm the only one with a mind of my own in that castle. Look here!
Dramatically, she raised her hand and placed it on her chest, hard enough that both could hear the thud of her palm against her collarbone.
I, the person in question, am fine regardless of the king's orders. Return to the castle and tell that to my father, please.
Lowering her hand, she gave the knight a glare before storming off, heading toward her white stallion that now stood waiting for her. Yet she could hear another set of steps behind her. Slowly, the princess stopped, and of course, just as she expected, the steps behind her did as well. Frustration bloomed in her chest as she realized the swordsman wasn't heading back to his horse, but was still following her. Clenching her fists, she turned on her heel to the same stoic face she had tried to walk away from.
Stop following me! Do you truly believe I can't handle myself out here?
The swordsman didn't immediately reply. He simply looked at her, something that made the princess's blood boil even more, until, surprisingly, he spoke a few words.
There are more monsters out there than there used to be.
He tore his gaze away from the princess's emerald eyes and glanced out into the forests of the Tabantha region.
Even for you, Princess Zelda, it's dangerous.
So you don't believe I can handle my own well-being? Is that what I meant to understand? Simply because I can't access this power of mine does not render me completely useless. Do you understand? I do not need an appointed knight. I do not need you. Now, if you would, please tell that to my father.
I can't do that. Your father wouldn't allow it. I also don't...
It was too late. The princess, infuriated by the mention of her father, had stormed off once again. Allowing a slight crack in his visage, the knight gave the smallest of frowns.
I never believed you to be useless. It's just... dangerous.
The sound of pre-dawn birdsong echoed through the mountains of Necluda, reaching the lone house on the cliffside. His ears twitched at the noise, and Link rolled over in bed, bringing the sheets up to his ears to try and block the noise out. He didn't want to rise from his bed, for he had slept surprisingly well last night. It was some of the best sleep he had gotten in some time. Regardless, he knew he had to get up. The promise he had made the princess the evening before floated through his head, to train her and not run off on his own without her. Though he still felt that bringing her along into such a monster-infested Hyrule was a poor idea, a promise was just that, a promise. With a deep breath, he pushed the blankets off his head and opened his eyes, only to be met with the beautiful sleeping face of his new housemate. Now fully awake, Link bolted up, his eyes still locked onto Zelda. She continued to sleep peacefully, the frame of her body visible through the sheet covering her body. Her deep, rhythmic breathing could be heard through the chirping of birds in the distance, and a few loose strands of her long, golden hair fluttered with each exhale. For a moment, Link simply stared down at her, the dim morning light causing her hair to glisten. He had slept so well he had completely forgotten he hadn't been sleeping alone. It was almost strange to remember how nervous he had been to fall asleep at the princess's side last night, and in the same bed, no less. Having calmed down, he raised his hands and pushed his bangs back, taking a more relaxed breath. From now until the start of their journey, he and the princess sleeping together would be the new normal. It was something he would have to get used to, which he didn't necessarily mind, not that he could admit it, even to himself. Recovering from his early morning shock, Link carefully pulled the sheets off his body, doing his best not to ruin Zelda's comfortable position. He eased over to the edge of the bed, slowly swung his legs over to the side, stretched, and stood up. Placing his hands on his hips, he turned and looked out the window beside the bed, taking note of the fading black sky of night becoming a deep, early morning blue. After a moment's pause and another glance at Zelda, Link took a deep breath, filling his lungs completely, then slowly exhaled.
Okay, let's get started.
Dragging his gaze away from the sleeping princess, he reached toward the nightstand, lifted his folded blue tunic, and put it back on. With his tunic now covering his white undershirt, his leathers returned to their places over his shoulder, and his blue tie holding his hair back, he lightly sat on the edge of the bed again and began putting on his boots. He looked back at where his sheathed purple-winged sword was leaning between the nightstand and the loft's railing, faintly glistening in the soft light of dawn. Silently, he gazed at the sword, listening to hear if it would say anything, yet it remained silent. No words, no sound, nothing. At this moment, it was just a sword, even if it did feel somewhat alive. Accepting the sword wouldn't say anything, Link stood and took it by its green-strapped handle, placed it over his shoulder, and buckled it in place. Leaving Zelda in the bed alone, he quietly descended to the ground floor, pausing when something occurred to him.
Right, I don't have the Sheikah slate. I should have one around here somewhere.
He scanned the room, wondering where he could have left it, before turning to face the storage area beneath the stairs. It was a small area filled with crates, barrels, and a few other items of little importance. Stepping under the stairs, he began searching through the clutter, moving aside pots, pans, smaller crates, and other household items he was sure they would find uses for now that Zelda was here, until eventually locating what he'd been searching for.
Here it is.
Careful not to make too much of a racket, he pulled out a very large woodcutter's axe.
I can't fight with it, but it should be good enough for cutting down trees. Glad I kept this here instead of taking up slate space.
With the axe now firmly in hand, he stepped out of the storage space, ready to head outside, then paused. He looked back at the space, now somewhat destroyed after his search, and realized that most of the barrels and crates had been relatively empty. Surely this space could be put to better use. Now having something to ponder other than Zelda being out in the wild with him, he went to the small kitchen counter, grabbed an apple, and exited the front door, quietly opening and closing it behind him as he stepped out into the grass. He turned toward the old, worn-down stable beside the house, where his chestnut mare stood waiting for him. He held up the apple he had grabbed for her, allowing her to eat from his hand. Listening to the crunching of the apple between Epona's teeth, he smiled.
We have some early morning work to do. We're headed to the forest down the road, where I'll be cutting down a few trees. That means apples will be falling left and right just for you.
Noticing the axe in his other hand, the mare snorted.
Yeah, you'll be carrying the wood I'm gathering. Don't worry, I'll also make sure you get whatever extra apples Zelda is able to pick later in the day as a reward. I promise.
The horse shook her white mane in response, which made Link smile. When the last of the apple had disappeared from his palm, he opened the gate, allowing the mare to exit the stall. After letting her stretch her legs for a moment, he climbed into Epona's saddle and gave her a light tap on the side of her neck to signal he was ready. At a trot, the pair headed toward the bridge leading to the village. With the dawn sun having risen beyond the mountain range, bright sunlight shone through the window panes of the cliffside house, right onto the golden-haired woman who slept alone in the bed. Wincing at its brilliance, Zelda turned over in the bed, shoving her face into the pillows before remembering her plans for the day. Yawning, she slowly pushed herself up, the sheets tumbling from her shoulders to her waist, stretched and rubbed her eyes.
Link, it's morning. We have an exciting day ahead of us, so... Link?
She received no response. The knight in question wasn't next to her, nor was he anywhere on the loft. Furrowing her brow, she gently pulled the sheets off her body and climbed out of the bed, then approached the loft's railing. Peering over, she found the downstairs level deserted.
Not again.
With a sigh, she returned to the messy bed sheets and straightened them out before sitting at the writing desk. Owing to the habit, she managed to fix her hair without any sort of mirror, putting it into her usual crown braid before changing into her deep blue tunic. Dressed, hair done, and bed made, she was prepared for the day. Her first objective was to find that housemate of hers. Hurrying down the stairs, she opened the front door and headed into the grass in front of the house, her eyes immediately searching the tree she had found him sleeping under before. Surprisingly, he wasn't there. In fact, Link had not only apparently vanished, but his horse as well. All she saw was the tree, the cooking pot, and multiple bundles of sticks piled next to them. Closing the door behind her, she stepped toward the large tree. Once she was closer, she realized the pot had been lit, with contents now boiling inside.
What's all this for? Could this perhaps be breakfast?
Zelda.
Twitching her ears, Zelda turned toward the bridge connecting their cliffside to the rest of the village, where she could now see Link and his mare trotting toward her.
Good morning. I hope you slept well.
As a matter of fact, I did.
I'm glad.
With a tug of the reins, Link brought his horse to a stop beside her. Swinging his leg over, he climbed down the saddle, hearing Zelda huff in frustration.
I wish I could ask you the same thing, but it appears as though you slept out here again. I hope I'm incorrect.
You are, actually. Incorrect, that is. I slept in the bed all night.
I hope I can trust that.
You can.
Without looking at her, he stepped toward the back of the saddle. Zelda tracked his movements and noticed the large bundle of wood firmly strapped down over Epona's rear, which Link was now reaching toward.
I made a promise. I said I wouldn't just disappear without saying something if I'd be gone for a while. I only left the bed a few hours ago to get an early start.
With a grunt and a tug, the bundle of sticks slid off Epona and into Link's arms. Throwing them over his shoulder, he turned, finally meeting Zelda's eyes while carefully balancing the bundle he held.
I swear.
She peered into his azure eyes, trying to see if there was a lie behind them. When she found no dishonesty, she smiled and clasped her hands behind her back.
All right, then. You have earned my trust.
Link chuckled as he moved toward the tree where the other bundles of sticks had been placed.
Does that mean I didn't have it before?
You had some, just not all of it after that stunt you pulled the night before last.
With a teasing giggle, she followed him to the pile. With a clattering thud, Link placed the new bundle with the others. For someone just as small as her, it was always amazing to see how strong he was.
You've simply earned the rest of it back.
Gotcha. I'm glad to hear I've regained that.
Still amused by her words, he moved toward the cooking pot. Bending down, he picked up 2 bowls that Zelda assumed he had brought out earlier while she was still sleeping. Grabbing a ladle in the pot, he gestured for her to sit as he filled the bowls with food.
Now, it's your turn to earn mine.
Confused, Zelda gave him a look as she took the breakfast being offered to her.
Earn yours? Do you mean your trust? Excuse me, but I don't believe I've given you a reason to distrust me.
Maybe not, but you haven't given me a reason to trust you. In the wild, I mean. You'll start learning after breakfast.
With the bowl in his hands, Link began to eat. Zelda, on the other hand, gasped in excitement as her eyes lit up. In light of Link's disappearance this morning, she had completely forgotten their plans.
Oh, you're right. Today's the day my training begins. Oh, this is so exciting. What am I learning first? Proper stance with the sword. How to pull a bowstring, perhaps. What's the first objective you planned for me?
Climbing trees and picking apples.
Immediately, Zelda's face changed from excitement to confusion.
What?
I said you'd be climbing trees and picking apples.
I heard what you said, but I don't understand why, is what I mean.
Bringing his bowl up to his lips, Link took a few massive gulps before sighing and placing it in the grass next to him before picking himself up off the ground.
Finish your food, and I'll explain.
Leaving Zelda with her bowl in her hands, he went to unstrap the extra buckles on Epona's saddle, thereby unhooking the axe secured to it. As he set Epona free to roam the fields of the cliffside, Zelda brought the bowl of food up to her lips, lost in thought.
If I may also ask, what are you doing with all that wood? Does this have to do with my training as well?
You'll see.
Accepting she wouldn't get a straight answer, Zelda continued eating, slightly annoyed, but hoping there was some reason for all the limited information. Once she finished her meal and cleaned up, she informed Link that she was ready for his explanation.
Okay.
He guided her to the apple tree beside the pond filled with lily pads. Clearing his throat, he placed a hand on the tree's trunk, looking up at the red apples hanging from the branches above their heads.
All right. Autumn arrived a few weeks ago, meaning these should be ripe enough to pick. So, I want you to climb up there and get me... let's shoot for around 10 apples.
Zelda frowned, her early excitement for training having been completely washed away.
Okay, can I again ask why? With how you spoke about Hyrule being far more dangerous than before, I'm having a hard time understanding why this is what we're starting with.
What did you think we'd be starting with?
At such a question, Zelda's eyebrow twitched.
Proper stance with a sword. How to pull a bowstring. The important things.
Raising his own eyebrow, Link placed his hand on the tree's trunk.
You don't think this is important?
I believe there may be some value to be gained for beginners, but not for me. You're treating me as though I've never traveled across Hyrule. Link, I'm sure you remember our journeys from before.
I do. But if you remember, it wasn't all easy going. We had some close calls before.
And I understand that, which is why I've agreed to this training in the first place. But all of our close calls were with monsters or the occasional Yiga. I've never had any trouble climbing over things or any other physical activities. This isn't like when you went to clear out monsters in the castle, Link. I'm not in a prayer dress anymore.
You're right, you're not. Which is why I'm asking you to do this. I've only ever seen you climb over a few easy rocks and some decently sized walls, but
those were necessary. This is not because I already know how to climb a tree.
Link didn't give an immediate response. He stared into her steely eyes for a moment before simply nodding.
If you're so confident that you don't need this, then just climb up there and give me one apple. If you can get it and bring it back to me, then I will agree that this is redundant and we can move on.
Link!
Climb up and get me at least one. It's as simple as that.
His face remained blank, ignoring the severe crease in Zelda's brow. Crossing her arms in clear annoyance, Zelda gave an irritated hum.
Are you truly committed to having me perform this act of redundancy?
Receiving Link's expressionless face in return, she forcefully exhaled, throwing up her hands in surrender before stepping toward the tree. To think, after all this time, he still had such little faith in her. Agitated, she stood before the tree, mutinously eyeing its thick trunk as she wondered what the best form for climbing was. A moment passed, then a few more, and then a full 10 minutes. Furrowing her brow in consternation, she glanced back at Link, who was still staring at her with the same expressionless face. Biting her tongue, she faced the tree again, deciding that thinking so hard about such a simple task was clearly the issue she was having. After rubbing her hands together in preparation, she awkwardly raised a foot and placed it on one of the tree's large roots. Pushing herself up to balance on the root's surface, she looked up at the branches and locked her emerald eyes onto one of the apples above, awkwardly hugging the tree as best as she could. Slowly, she lifted her thigh, pressing that against the tree as well. Gripping onto the bark, with a grunt, she lifted her other foot off the root, her legs hugging the tree. Carefully, she began to inch up the tree, steadfastly ignoring the scraping feeling against her torso, legs, and thighs. Link watched in silence as she slowly made her way up the trunk, his arms now folded, carefully observing her hesitant movements until Zelda reached halfway up the tree. Unsurprisingly, to Link that is, Her breathing had become labored and heavy with exhaustion, her arms and legs visibly shaking with each motion until, eventually, they gave out. Losing her grip, she fell backward, landing on her back with a thud in the grass. With a whimper, she rolled onto her side with one hand now placed on her sore lower back, the other resting between her stinging thighs. Taking a few steps toward her, Link crouched down next to her.
Are you all right?
I don't understand. Why is this important? I didn't need this sort of thing before, so why are you making me do this now? How will this help?
This will help because we aren't simply following the road anymore. Most of Hyrule is wilderness now, and a lot of our journey will be happening off-road, I'm sure. Even if we try to stay on the road, at some point we will have to make a detour, whether it's to get away from monsters or for other reasons. I know you like a little exploration, and you always mention wanting to do more. I remember that well enough, right?
Zelda nodded in answer, keeping her face hidden by the tall grass. At this, Link gave a slight smile.
Can you stand?
Humbled, Zelda pulled her face from the grass, then looked up to see Link's face. He looked down at her as he remained crouched, now holding a hand out. With a groan, she placed a hand into his palm, allowing him to pull her up to her feet while standing himself. After ensuring Zelda was okay, watching as she now dusted herself off, he continued.
Climbing, running, paragliding, all of these things are things we'll need to have you go through before anything else. I know it's not very exciting, but it is important.
Right. I understand. I apologize, it's just... I didn't expect to be so poor at such a simple task.
I wouldn't say you were poor. You made it decently far up. I'm actually impressed.
Please, spare me the hollow praise.
I mean it. You did better than I expected.
This only made Zelda frown more, so he did have little faith in her.
Zelda, you aren't going to get this immediately. It's not something that just naturally comes to you. It's like research. The more you study, the more you know, right? It's the same thing with physical training. It takes practice.
I understand what you're saying, but at least with research, there's something unknown to be found. Something that encourages me. This just tells me how far behind you I am.
Well, I don't think that's a fair comparison. You've always said I was strangely strong.
Despite his words, Zelda's disappointment hadn't dissipated. After a moment of tense silence, the knight's eyes brightened suddenly.
Hey, Zelda.
At the call of her name, Zelda forced herself to meet Link's eyes once again. Yet, this time he wasn't simply standing still. He had raised his hand up and behind his shoulder, grabbing the green-strapped handle of the purple-winged sword that sat on his back. Pulling it from its sheath, he held it out to her.
Go on. Take it.
Though Zelda looked skeptical about his intentions, she took the sword into her hands, needing to hold on to the handle with both of them so that she would not drop it. While she had held the sword before, it was always pointed downward, whereas holding it upright was far more challenging.
Keep it held. That's it. It's hard holding it up, isn't it?
Zelda nodded, now putting much more focus on keeping the blade upright in her grasp.
You haven't yet built the muscles to hold a sword properly. While they aren't really all that heavy, their length makes you use different muscles to help keep it up.
As he spoke, he moved around her body until he eventually stood behind her. To Zelda's surprise, she suddenly felt a light touch on her back through her golden strands of hair. At that feeling, her cheeks burned, causing her to almost lose hold of the sword. Despite this, Link continued, unaware of her sudden building warmth.
Such as your back, shoulders, and upper arms.
Is that so?
It is.
Her arms were shaking, struggling even more to keep the sword up straight. She couldn't tell whether his closeness or her rapidly decreasing energy caused the blade to sway. Slowly, Link moved away from her back. The moment he moved, Zelda's arms gave out again, and the sword began to fall. Effortlessly, Link grabbed the sword by the winged guard, helping her keep the blade from digging into the dirt.
Climbing, and everything else I plan for you to do, will help you build these muscles. Instead of seeing this as a setback, think of this as the beginning of one of your studies, with the end goal being the proper use of a sword. these studies just happen to be physical, okay?
Yes. Yes, I understand. Thank you, Link.
Carefully, as not to drop the sword entirely, she allowed Link to take it back from her grasp. Free from its weight, she took a deep breath, feigning that she was simply regaining her energy from holding the blade, but in reality, she was trying to calm herself. To think such simple actions could affect her so, even after having shared a bed, something she had encouraged. It was honestly laughable, and the only thing that could pull her back to her conversation with Link was the sound of the Master Sword being returned to its scabbard. Desperate to maintain focus, Zelda cleared her throat.
If you wouldn't mind, could you perhaps show me the best way to climb this tree, then? I'm ready to learn properly, especially after such a thorough and effective demonstration. However, I can't exactly do that without some sort of reference. So, if you could, please.
Yeah, I don't mind at all. Here, watch how I do it. First things first, you don't want to hug the tree. That will make it hard for you to move your arms. However, you want to use your legs to push yourself up. Leg strength is just as vital.
From there, Link explained what the most optimized climbing form looked like, demonstrating against the tree as he spoke. For Zelda, who was certainly listening attentively, it was almost funny to see him explain in such detail. If it weren't for her needing such skills to go out into the wild, she most likely wouldn't have cared much about such physical activities, yet she knew she would have listened regardless. Hearing him talk so much was nice, considering at one point in their relationship he hadn't spoken much at all. Whether it was because they were in the castle or the weight of their responsibilities was too much to bear. Compared to then, this was wonderful. After watching Link climb the tree multiple times, Zelda soon found herself practicing the motions he was showing. Link was now sitting on one of the tree branches, watching her mimic him at the base of the tree.
You're doing well. It looks like you're getting the gist of it.
You say that, but it's not as though I'm up there with you yet.
Zelda said this without looking up at him, trying to find the best way to grip her fingers into the bark the way Link had shown her. With a chuckle, Link jumped from the tree, landing in the grass next to her. He held out his hand, proffering the 2 apples in his palm.
You'll get it. It just takes time. Set your goal as preparing your muscles to learn to use a sword or a bow. Don't quit and keep trying. Unless you want to live here and make your everyday travels a simple walk to the village. It is ultimately your choice.
Oh, you know very well that's not what I want to do.
I know it's not. That's why I have no doubt you'll be able to get the apples you need from up there.
Tossing his apple in the air before catching it again, he took a step back.
Well, I'll leave you to it.
You're leaving?
Yeah, I gotta go pick something up. It shouldn't take me too long. Plus, I promised Epona the extra apples we gathered from the tree, so...
He gestured to his horse, who was grazing near the cliff's edge, with the apple remaining in his hand.
I think you'll be fine without me. It's time for you to take what you've learned and find your way up there.
Oh, you're not afraid of me cheating? I could most likely find another way of getting them down.
Knowing you and your intelligence, I'm certain you could. But I trust you.
Still smiling, he turned and began walking away, only stopping when Zelda called out to him one last time, causing him to turn back to her.
If I may ask, the sword, has it spoken to you at all recently?
The Master Sword?
Hesitating, he looked over his shoulder at the gleaming purple wings resting behind him.
No, not since the battle. Why do you ask?
No reason in particular. I just noticed you glancing at it from time to time. It made me curious, is all.
No, it hasn't. Good luck getting those apples. Remember, I need 10.
With that, he turned away. Silently, Zelda watched as he made his way to Epona, feeding her the apple before hopping back onto the saddle and riding across the bridge to Hateno. It was a curious answer, one she wanted to inquire more about, yet it would have to wait. Taking a bite of the apple he had given her, she turned and faced the tree, looking up at the branches above once more.
All right, let's try this again, shall we?
Finishing her apple, she set the core on the ground. She stepped back onto the roots before attempting to climb the tree once more, where she again fell, yet continued to pick herself up. The mountain breeze blew through Link's bangs as Epona trotted up the winding paths toward the technological laboratory situated at the top. Approaching the entrance, he gently pulled on Epona's reins, bringing her to a halt before sliding off the saddle. Gently patting the mare's white mane as he passed by, he stepped toward the wooden double doors with the eye and teardrop insignia, ready to pry the doors open as he had always done. Before he could, though, a glint of blue appeared beneath his feet. Stepping to the side, he watched as the glowing, circular platform pulsed blue, until a river of blue lights came flying down from the sky on top of it. As more light strings fell from the sky, they began to coalesce into the form of two bodies, one small and one large. Eventually, with a final flash, both the lab director and her assistant appeared in full, standing on the circular platform together, holding hands. The moment they solidified, the little director pulled her small hand from the man's, immediately turning her attention to the Sheikah slate that had teleported them. Her eyes were obscured by the technological goggles that usually rested on her head, while her assistant nervously began patting his body.
We formed. Whew. Thank the goddess Hylia.
Relieved, he placed one hand on his chest while his other adjusted his rectangular glasses. At this, the little girl hummed.
It sounds as though you didn't trust my calculations, Symin. Am I to believe you've lost faith in your director?
Nonsense, Miss Purah. It's just... testing on ourselves seems a little dangerous is all.
So, you'd rather we have Linky, the only person capable of dealing with all the monsters in Hyrule, and Zelda, the girl with the blood of the goddess, test for us? Or would you rather use two random civilians from Hateno Village? I'm sure they'd readily agree to test something fancy like this.
Miss Purah!
Symin recoiled in horror, looking down at her, yet Purah simply shrugged, still tapping on the slate as she looked at its screen through her goggles.
You complained, not me.
It wasn't a complaint, just a natural reaction to... Miss Purah, was that horse always there?
Symin adjusted his glasses again, ensuring his eyes weren't playing tricks on him as he now noticed the chestnut mare, who was grazing the grass in front of them.
We don't have horses, Symin. The only visitor we get that owns a horse is Linky, meaning he went inside as we teleported. Or...
I'm right here.
While Purah didn't react to the hero's sudden response, Symin slightly jumped, his hand now on his heart.
By the three goddesses, Link! How long have you been standing there?
Well, I was standing there, but I saw the pad glow, so I stepped aside.
Though it was a simple answer, Symin looked horrified at his words.
You were standing on the teleportation platform? Why, if you hadn't moved while our matter was reconstructing, who knows what would have happened to us?
That's something we should consider researching further at some point.
Purah was clearly unfazed by the potential consequences of forming on someone.
I think I need a break.
The assistant's face went pale, his mind now clearly full of multiplying potential outcomes his mind had conjured up. Turning around, he opened the door to the lab and disappeared, leaving the little girl, who was still tapping away on the slate screen, and Link alone outside.
So, what did you need? I know you didn't come just to say hello, not when you should be figuring out the next steps with Zelda.
Well, I just needed to borrow the slate for a moment. I need to get something out of its inventory, but it looks like you've already finished your work.
Excuse me, but I have not finalized my work on the slate's teleportation at all. That was test number 1 out of who knows how many. This test just now could have been a successful fluke for all we know, so you'll have to wait to get this back.
Alright then. Would you mind if I got something out of it?
I don't know. Will you run off with it when I give it to you?
At this, Link furrowed his brow.
What makes you think I'd do that?
You haven't told me what you plan to do with her yet.
The little girl finally looked up from the slate. Taking the glasses resting in front of her hair bun, she swapped them with the goggles, revealing her amber irises.
Who knows? You may take this device here and teleport far away, leaving the princess here all alone.
I wouldn't do that.
Purah raised an eyebrow, to which he frowned.
Okay, I wouldn't without a good reason to.
At least he's being honest.
Look, I just need to get my paraglider out. I need it.
Receiving another look from Purah, he continued.
I need it for Zelda. I'm teaching her how to survive in the wild, and a paraglider is something she'll need to practice later.
So she's learning.
Just like you said she should.
Impressive. I'm surprised you took to the idea so easily. I was sure you'd need more convincing.
I still just might.
When meeting Purah's eyes again, he frowned.
I don't like seeing her get hurt, even if it's just a little. I mean, even now, I'm sure she's probably fallen out of that tree multiple times.
You have her falling out of trees?
I have her climbing trees. You know, the basics.
When Purah furrowed her brow, he defended himself.
Hey, research is your thing, adventuring is mine. I know what I'm teaching her.
I suppose I can't argue with that.
With a sigh, she held the slate up for him to take.
Here, get what you need.
Nodding in appreciation, Link took the slate from her little hand. Raising it up, he tapped the screen himself and began sliding through its contents, eventually tapping the icon he was looking for. In a flash of blue strings of light, the paraglider formed. It had smooth, sanded, curved wood for the handles and frame, and a thick piece of fabric in the center.
There we go. All I need.
Link slid his arm through one of the paraglider's handles to hold it up easier. Purah nodded and held her hand out.
Fantastic! If you would please hand that back over, that would be great. We still have a multitude of experiments to run. Hey!
With a tap of the screen, Link vanished in a flash of blue, turning into strings of light as his matter flew up into the sky.
Why, you untrustworthy rascal of a Hylian!
Before her rant could continue, the teleportation pad beneath her tiny feet began to glow. Sighing, she stepped aside, allowing the strings of blue to return to the ground and form the hero's body again. When the light disappeared, Link gave the unamused researcher a grin.
Ha ha! You think you're so clever snapping away like that, don't you, Linky?
Wow, you really thought I took off just like that? Come on, it was a little funny. Ow!
With a stomp, the little girl's heel dug into the toes of his boot, causing the knight to stumble in pain, bending just low enough for Purah to snatch the Sheikah slate out of his hands. While Link hopped on one foot in pain, Purah fumed.
It was hilarious. Glad to know not all of your humor vanished the moment Zelda returned.
With a tiny humph, the researcher walked around the still wincing knight, heading for the front doors of the lab Symin had walked through earlier. Reaching up, she grabbed the door handle, but before she pulled it open, she spoke again, prompting Link to look away from his foot and at her.
Linky, you should show that fun side of yourself to Zelda more often. With how serious you are around her, I think it would do you both some good. Now beat it, you little prankster.
With that, she opened the door and disappeared inside the lab, closing the door with a slam. Though his toe still hurt, he placed his foot back on the ground, thoughtfully staring at the door Purah had disappeared through.
Yeah, well, I'm taller than you, so...
Link mumbled through gritted teeth, trying to ignore the soreness in his big toe. Regardless, his mind had already started turning as he walked back to Epona, his arm still hooked through the paraglider's handles.
Am I always serious around Zelda?
It wasn't as if he wanted to always be serious around her. In fact, he would like to show her more fun sides of himself. Unfortunately, whether Purah or anyone else could see it, this wasn't the time for fun. Zelda was expected to head into the wilds with him, where monsters were more dangerous than ever. With the princess, he couldn't afford to have too much fun with her. He needed to prepare her. With this in mind, Link climbed back onto Epona's saddle, and with a tug of the reins, he guided her back down the mountain. Yet, despite the conclusion he had come to, Purah's words continued to echo in his mind until he crossed the bridge and arrived back at his house. Bringing his mare to a stop, he looked from the saddle to see Zelda, currently halfway up the tree trunk, now desperately reaching out for one of the lowest hanging apples in the tree. Humming in response to the sight, Link slid from the saddle again, careful not to bump Epona's side with the paraglider hanging from his arm.
My humorous side.
Still watching as Zelda stretched out her fingers as far as she could, he quietly walked back to the tree just as his housemate's fingers lost their strength. Falling back into the grass, Zelda whined before seeing Link stand over her. Groaning, she picked herself up, rubbing her backside.
Welcome back.
Hey, Zelda, how's it hanging?
Zelda's emerald eyes narrowed at this, her glare piercing his body.
I mean, I see the apples are still hanging. Don't stop climbing when you're close. Use those branches and get high so you can properly reach them. Don't make climbing and grabbing the apple any harder on yourself.
Though Zelda still looked annoyed with Link's earlier choice of words, she dusted herself off before nodding, indicating she understood what he meant. Suddenly, she gestured toward the paraglider.
Wasn't that in the Sheikah slate? You went to see Purah without me.
You have training to do. You can go see Purah later.
Though it looked like Zelda wanted to argue this, Link gestured toward the tree for her to continue her training. Reluctantly, Zelda went back to the tree trunk while he began to walk toward the house.
Besides, why bother going to see Purah when she only knows how to get people in trouble?
Crickets chirped their nightly song as the golden aura of twilight descended upon the lands once more. Zelda had been attempting to climb up the tree for the entire day with few breaks in between, desperately trying to pick any apple she could reach before her arms and legs gave way. Though she had succeeded in grabbing a few apples, which were now scattered across the grass beneath the tree where she struggled, her energy had fully depleted. Just as the apples she had managed to pull from the branches, she too lay in the grass, her hair wild, her clothing drenched in sweat, and her breathing ragged and heavy. It was exhausting. She had been at this for hours, and while her technique had certainly improved, having picked up little tricks after so many attempts, she could tell her muscles simply weren't up to the challenge. She fiercely burned, even while simply lying down. It felt as though even the clothes on her body were too much to carry, keeping her firmly planted on the ground. With what little energy she could muster, she tilted her head, looking at the upside-down scenery of the house she now called home. Eventually, she located her housemate, who had been sitting in the grass nearby for some time. For the past few hours, he had been calling out to her, giving climbing advice he thought would be helpful, which it sometimes was, while inspecting the paraglider and some of the wood he had brought home. Though she had asked what he was doing multiple times, he'd always waved her off, telling her to focus on the apples she was supposed to be collecting. It wasn't long before Link eventually looked up from his project, ostensibly wondering what had happened to the occasional grunts from Zelda's efforts and the crunching of grass every time she fell. He locked eyes with her before looking up at the sky. Realizing how spent Zelda truly was, he set the paraglider down in the grass, placing large pieces of wood on it to ensure it wouldn't blow away, before picking himself up and walking over to where Zelda lay. Crouching down at her side, he gave her a smile.
It looks like your stamina is spent for the day.
This is exhausting work. Please, tell me, this is the only day we're doing this.
Sorry, Zelda, but I only see 4 apples on the ground here. You've got 6 more to go before I'm satisfied.
Zelda groaned, head dropping to the side. Her cheek, now in the grass, had completely turned away, so Link couldn't see her face. Chuckling, the knight sat down next to her.
It's hard, I know, but it'll pay off. I promise it will.
Do you truly mean that?
If you can build these muscles up, and a few others, so much of Hyrule will open up to you.
Still smiling, he looked out across the scenic Golden Mountain Range in the distance.
There are so many places I want to show you and so much to explore. Even if it weren't for the monsters, at some point, I would need you to be able to do these things so you can reach and see them for yourself. I mean it when I say that this will help.
After another moment of silence, Zelda sighed, her breathing less labored than it had been.
Fine. I'll accept this training. If you do truly believe it'll do me good, then... Okay. I apologize for having so much difficulty with it before.
Who wouldn't? It's not every day someone is asked to suddenly climb an apple tree, even as a normal person.
At this, Zelda tiredly giggled, then winced. Her lungs weren't too appreciative of the sudden laughter.
I think it's best for you to call it a day here. Come on, let's get you inside. I'll make you a good meal, something that'll help bring your stamina back a little bit.
That sounds wonderful, but,
When Link hummed in question, her cheeks slightly flushed.
I believe I'll need some assistance getting to my feet.
At this, Link chuckled before pulling himself up. He held out a hand, and with all the strength in her body, Zelda managed to shakily reach her arm up in order to take it. With a light tug on her arm, Zelda was pulled to her feet, only for her legs to instantly begin violently shaking. They had no energy left, causing her knees to buckle the moment she was upright. Seeing her about to fall, Link quickly wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling him close to her in order to keep her standing. Desperate not to fall, Zelda gripped the front of his blue tunic. Though her arms and fingers had such little strength, she was sure her entire weight was being held up by Link alone.
Oh dear. I'm sorry, Link. I didn't realize just how tired I was. Is this normal?
She looked up at Link, meeting his eyes. It was only now that she realized what position they were in. They stood in the middle of the field, a light breeze gently caressing them in the twilight glow. She was in Link's arms, his grip firm so as not to drop her, tightly pressed against his chest. She could just barely feel his heartbeat pounding against her chest. Was it faster than usual? Before her thoughts could continue, Link appeared to snap back to reality.
Yeah, that's normal. You're probably gonna feel that way tomorrow. I'm sorry for grabbing you so inappropriately.
No, it's fine. Believe me, it's all right. I'm just glad not to have fallen into the grass again. I think I've done enough of that for one day. Would you mind helping me to the house? I'd love to try that meal of yours.
Of course. Yeah, we'll go one step at a time, all right?
Together, still holding each other tightly, the two managed to return to the house, where they enjoyed a meal before turning in for the night, once again sharing the bed. While he still looked a bit nervous, Zelda could tell he had grown slightly more comfortable with her, which put a smile on her face as she drifted to sleep, unprepared for the soreness that was to follow the next morning.
Well, hello! Thank you all for watching the 9th installment of the Couple of the Wild Audioplay. We hope you had a pleasant time. If you'd like to be notified when future chapters release, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. If you want to see chapters early, and to get episode sneak peeks, check out the Patreon in the description below. We really appreciate all of you for watching. Until next time.
However, you want to use your legs to push yourself up. Leg strength is just as vital when it comes to climbing. From there, you're going to go left and right and slowly alternate. You don't want to hang too much, otherwise you waste your energy and risk maybe slipping off of the surface that you're on. However, with enough time and enough practice, I'm sure it's something that'll start to be second nature to you. Eventually, once you start getting good at everything, we might be able to teach you how to jump from limb to limb. And maybe once your finger strength gets a bit better, we might be able to teach you how to do it from rocks as well. Don't worry. I would advise maybe not to eat too much before you go climbing though, unless it's a really hearty meal, in which case that might actually help your climbing. It's better to kind of go on a somewhat empty stomach, but not too empty, if that makes sense. Otherwise, you might risk feeling too full and it could weigh you down, or there's other times where it seems like you might be a little too heavy for one rock and maybe too light for another. Though ultimately, it is up to preference, of course. I prefer a good meal before doing anything, so I'm not really one to talk.